Hello again, football fans. This is Anthony coming back at you with Two Fat Guys Fantasy Football. We are continuing our series of team offseason breakdowns today, and today we are looking at the Buffalo Bills. As always, let's jump right into it. Take a look at what this roster looked like at the end of the season for Buffalo last year. So Buffalo was the preseason Super Bowl favorite for a lot of people last year. They made a few key additions, and the roster looked really good going into the season. And they actually played really well and were very competitive throughout. So unfortunately, they had some key injuries that kind of hurt them down the stretch, but and through the season as a whole. But all in all, they did play well enough to live up to those expectations. Um, with Buffalo, it all starts with quarterback with Josh Allen. Josh Allen is one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. Um, can make every throw on the field. Is an incredible runner. Um, he is just a good foundational building block for the Buffalo franchise. So they did well when they got him, and they're building around him. In the wide receiver room, we're led, of course, by Stephon Diggs. Stephon Diggs is an incredible talent. This offense really started to click when he was brought over from Minnesota, and he has a great relationship and great rapport with Josh Allen, and they combine to be one of the best uh, quarterback wide receiver duos in the NFL. Rest of the wide receiver room was not as strong with Gabe Davis and Isaiah McKenzie. I do like Isaiah McKenzie quite a bit as a slot receiver. He does a really good job out in that role. Um, so he adds a nice dimension there. Um, they also have some veteran run with Cole Beasley and Jay Crowder. Um, Jamison Crowder. But I really like the guy they drafted last year, Khalil Shakir. I think he's going to come in and push for more playing time this year. Towards the end of the season last year, he really started to show some flashes of talent. He still had some developing to do, and I think a full off season will help that a lot. But if you're looking for a guy in fantasy as kind of a dart throw kind of player later in the draft, I think he could actually step in and outproduce Gabe Davis this year. Not sure that it happens, but I think he has the possibility to do it. So definitely worth a late round dart throw, and a guy I like a fair bit. Uh, the running back room, Devin Singletary, James Cook were the primary. They traded for Naeem Hines late in the season. Naeem Hines is a nice gadget guy, great return specialist. I think that's more his role on the team is as a return specialist. It was a solid running back room, but not great. Definitely something that they wanted to improve. The offensive line, again, solid but not great. They've got some veteran leadership here, a little bit of middling youth, late youth when it comes to NFL careers. Some guys that do a pretty good job, but it's not a spot where I feel like they're 100% sold on what they've got. It's definitely a spot where they feel like they could improve. Dawson Knox is very adequate as a tight end. Um, he's not an elite talent, but he is definitely a nice streaming option. Unfortunately, it's just the way the offense is structured. Some weeks he is just completely written out of the game plan. Other weeks he's very dominant. So it's just a matter of which week you're going to get. Um, so he's not a guy that I want to target in fantasy, but if I miss out on the tight end targets that I want, I would be okay with him as a fallback option. All in all, it is a really good offense. They can score with anybody and score a lot of different ways. On defense, last year the big signing was bringing over Von Miller. Um, Von Miller is still one of the best pass rushers in the NFL. Unfortunately, his career, or his not his career, but his season was cut very short due to injury last year, and he didn't have the impact that they wanted him to have down the stretch. He's a guy that could have made a difference as you got into the playoffs. He knows how to win. He is kind of game plan dependent and script dependent, he is going to be a force on that defense. So definitely makes things harder for opposing offenses. So he was definitely missed once the playoffs rolled around. But he is a guy that is also a very good recruiter, has been making some calls to help strengthen the team this year. Ed Oliver is a very good D tackle. Um, Needs a contract, so we'll see what ends up happening with that. Greg Rousseau, great pass rusher, developing pass rusher on the other side. They also have a lot of rotational depth with Shaq Lawson and AJ Epinenza. So they have a good, solid defensive line with a lot of rotational talent there. Linebacker core was led by Tremaine Edmonds, who is now a member of the Chicago Bears, but very young, ascending linebacker, sideline to sideline guy, very good tackler, very good in coverage. He is a good middle linebacker to build around. Um, we also have Matt Milano, who is um, a star. There's nothing else to say. He is one of the best linebackers, best tackling linebackers in the NFL. Always has a nose for the football, is always around the play, and really is just he's just great at what he does. On the other side, we have AJ Klein. At this stage, is just kind of a rotational veteran presence. He's adequate, is about all I'll say for that. Their safety room is the best in the NFL, led by Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer. You cannot talk about an overall safety room without saying that this is the best that's out there. Both guys are absolutely incredible at their positions. Both guys can make every play. True captains on the defensive side of the ball. Really make this defense hard to plan for. Um, in the cornerback room, we're led by Tre'Davious White, who came back from injury this year and was working his way back. So I don't think we ever saw a 100% Trey White this year. I think we will get to see that as we get into this year. But Trey White is a very good number one corner in the NFL. Definitely a guy that you have to plan for. Tyron Johnson is another solid corner. And then they drafted Khair Aleem. Out of Florida last year. A guy who, as the year got on, really showed that he was getting better and better. And a full offseason, he could make for a very good third corner for this group. And that makes this group kind of scary. This is a defense that, like I said, on paper, this defense could very easily have been a Super Bowl contender. But unfortunately, things got a little derailed. Von Miller went out early, and uh, both Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer dealt with injuries. And it just never kind of all came together the way that they were hoping for. But it is a very sound roster from top to bottom. But let's take a look now and see what this roster has done since the offseason began. They had a few guys that were going to be some key free agents. They had a few decisions that they were going to have to make, and I think they navigated the waters pretty well. Um, it's a roster that, when we look at it, it's still a very strong roster. It's going to be a roster capable of competing just as much. I'll start with the offensive line here. It's still a group that is good, if not great. I think that they're adequate, probably a middle third group in the NFL, and definitely are good enough to get the job done. Nothing more to be said about Josh Allen. But we did we let Devin Singletary go, and we brought in Damian Harris to replace him. Damian Harris is just a straight upgrade to Singletary in every way. He is just a better all-around back. He's a much stronger runner between the tackles. He's not a terrible pass catcher. He's going to be good in short space, a nice leak out option. But he is a very good running back who's going to take some of the load off of Josh Allen, especially on goal line carries. He's a guy that's going to be able to fall forward and get those tough yards. Um, I think you pair that with James Cook, who is a more electric runner. Uh, more exciting, has a few more elusive skills than maybe Damian Harris does, but it's a good pairing there. I think that James Cook gets better this year, and I think that that's a very very good duo to have with Naeem Hines in there as the third back. Gabe Davis is still our number two receiver behind Stephon Diggs. We did bring in Deontay Hardy as a third slot piece. Um, I think he's relatively the same kind of piece as Isaiah McKenzie. I think I actually like McKenzie a little bit more. Hardy is a little bit younger, might have a higher ceiling, but he's also a little bit smaller. So it'll be interesting to see how they end up using him. Um, but as I mentioned before, I expect Khalil Shakir to get a little more run. But we also have Trent Sherfield, who was brought in as well. Trent Sherfield had a good season last year. He gives them a lot of options. This is a wide receiver room that I think is improved over last year. Um, Having Cole Beasley and Jamison Crowder replaced with Trent Sherfield and Khalil Shakir, I think is an upgrade to that room. Dawson Knox is still our number one tight end. Uh, might be looking to add a second tight end to during the draft at some point, just because of how deep the position is. Not really a spot where I think that they're going to go early, but as deep as the position is, they could definitely get another piece there later in the draft. Looking at the defense, as we look across the defensive line, it is the same. We didn't lose anybody here. Uh, Still Boogie Basham, Shaq Lawson, AJ Epineza, Ed Oliver, Daquan Jones. Uh, it's a good, solid group with Rousseau and Von Miller being able to provide a good pass rush. Matt Milano, I think, moves over to middle linebacker and takes over for the departing Tremaine Edmonds. And they did sign Taylor Rapp. Taylor Rapp has played strong safety, but I think he fits pretty well as an off-ball linebacker. I think he slides down and plays that position for them here, um, but he also offers depth in case of injury um, to to either of the safeties. He can slide back there, but I think ideally right now they're going to plan on using him kind of as an off-ball linebacker role to keep him on the field and keep his big hitting and tackling skills around. AJ Klein was re-signed to a one-year deal, so the linebacker room maybe took a step back a little bit, but I think it's still adequate. The safeties are still the best duo in the NFL, and nothing has really changed in the cornerback room. Our top guys are still the same. So it's an offense that I think has gotten slightly better, um, and it's a defense that has maybe taken a very minor step back, but they did do a really good job um, navigating the free agent period and keeping the guys they needed to keep, making the tough decisions on who to let walk so that they had the salary cap room to continue to be competitive for the next several years. So it's always a hard balance to make, and I think they did a really good job with it this year, picking and choosing their places. So let's kind of take a look now at see what they might be looking to do. Uh, Later in the draft where they're going to be picking. Um, we're down at the bottom of the first round as we have been for the last couple of years, and they've got a few things that they can look at. Um, D line is an option for them. Offensive line is an option for them. Um, Wide receiver, honestly, is an option for them, just to add some more top end talent there. Um, there's a lot of different ways that we could go here. Um, I like I like a lot of their options here. Um, so let's kind of just take a peek. Let's look at some of the receivers. We've talked a little bit in depth about some of these receivers. A guy like Jordan Addison might still be sitting there for them. That would be an interesting pickup. I think that would be a nice fit. Um, Tight end, I don't think they're going to go. A guy like over here, Anton Harrison is definitely a name that could be available there. Maybe even Dewan Jones could be a couple of names that you might look at if you're the Buffalo Bills here. You could also look at potentially some of the defensive linemen. A guy like Brian Breesy can play inside out. Miles Murphy would be a name there. Keon White could come in as well. Um, there are several names that could be available here. Lucas Van Ness would even be interesting if he were to slide. It's a little early for either Tui Peluto or Isaiah Foskey, but those are some interesting names maybe in the second round. Straight D tackle or three techniques. Kids out of Northwestern would be an interesting name at this spot. Kalijah Cansey, if he's available, would be interesting. Even Mozzie Smith would be an interesting name. I wouldn't hate it. It'd be a little early, a little bit of a reach, but um, it's definitely a spot where they could look. Um, Linebacker is another spot where I think they could address. This would be a really interesting spot for a guy like Jack Campbell or Trenton Simpson, um, or even like Drew Sanders to go, and then you could slide Milano back out to his outside spot and really create some matchup issues. So that's an interesting spot, something that they might do as well. Um, Best player available might be a name that they could look at, like BJ Ojulari would be an interesting name as a pass rusher. Corners, a guy like Deontay Banks or Keely Ringo or Emmanuel Forbes. All three could be names that they might look at just to strengthen that room because you never can have too many corners. Or they could look to just add depth behind their safeties because Jordan Poyer is, uh, on the back end. Micah Hyde is getting a little older as well. So a guy like Brian Branch would be an interesting name to look at as well. But they are really at a spot where they can just take best player available, and that's what I think they're going to do. But like I said, there are a lot of options for them here. It's a roster that is maybe not going to be our Super Bowl darlings coming into the season this year, but they're definitely on paper one of the better teams in the NFL, and uh, they're in a spot where they don't have to do anything specific in the draft. They can just do what take the best player that's out there. So um, that's going to do it for me in our look at the Buffalo Bills. Uh, if you have some differing opinions on some of the guys that we talked about, please let me know. I'd love to hear it. If you have an idea on which team we should do next, as we're getting down to the back end of these breakdowns, as we get just about a week away from the draft here, um, I'm open to suggestions on filling that out. But as always, once we get through all the breakdowns and the draft and kind of the aftermath of the draft, we will be revisiting each of these teams, taking a look at some potential fantasy outlooks for some of the guys as we move closer to the season. But that's going to do it for me. As always, I appreciate every one of you. Thanks for watching. We'll talk to you next time.